Morena kia koutou, thank you for coming. And I hope you've already enjoyed reading through our awesome tax policy this morning. Because in it, we have outlined that Aotearoa does have enough for everyone to thrive. We all should be able to have a warm house, safe home, affordable kai and power bills, well-resourced schools and quality healthcare when needed. All of us should be able to enjoy a thriving natural environment. These are the basic foundations of healthy communities. And New Zealand's economy right now is the largest it has ever been. There is more than enough in Aotearoa for everyone to live a good life. But the riches of our large economy are not being shared properly. The system has been rigged over successive governments to prevent the resources going to where they are needed. Mega corporates like banks, supermarkets, and power companies are enjoying massive record profits while people struggle to save, to afford kai, and to pay their power bills. Critical services and public resources like housing and health and our natural environment are struggling to cope under increased pressure. These are basic needs for people to live decent lives, and our communities deserve them to be properly funded. While massive riches are being held in the hands of a few, 1 in 7 children in Aotearoa is living in poverty, going without kai, warm clothes, and heating in their homes. Too many people are struggling despite their hard work. The taxi driver who tells me even with him and his wife both working full-time, they are still struggling to provide for their small child. The elderly woman in Manurewa who cares for her very sick husband who cannot afford the transport costs to get him to his life-saving treatment. The South Auckland students who are having to work 30, sometimes 40 and 50 hours a week, often night shifts, to help their family pay bills while trying to juggle the demands of their schoolwork. These hardships have generational impacts most severely on the families and the lives who are bearing them. When we tolerate this inequality, we are accepting the unacceptable. People living with uncertainty and poorer health, worse off in education and employment, living with the reality of chronic stress and living without dignity. We are all worse off when any of us suffer. By contrast, an individual rich lister has made $1,026 in the 3 minutes that I have been talking to you. When a small group controls most of the money, property and business, everyone else is forced to compete for what's left. This pushes up prices, weakens wages, and makes it harder for ordinary people to make ends meet. This sort of inequality that somehow has become such a normal part of life in Aotearoa today diminishes everyone's freedom, safety, and potential. It doesn't have to be this way. We used to do better as a country in caring for each other. We can and will do so again.
Look, our country is beautiful. New Zealanders are talented and creative and innovative. We have all of the right ingredients to thrive, but this current economic recipe is not delivering it. Every other day right now, we get new news of another iconic local business closing down. More culture and memories bulldozed, more jobs lost, more potential here at home squandered. This is not inevitable. As a country, we can decide that it is our priority to support local, which means economic settings that genuinely invest in us, our infrastructure, our jobs, our creativity, and God forbid regular punters having enough resources to go out and have a good time. We can keep our money flowing into and building our own economy instead of being sucked offshore into the profits of shareholder portfolios. And that means a fairer tax system, which supports a lower cost of living for food, housing, power bills, and the basics. We can do this. Other countries have, but we need to understand that it is not spontaneously just gonna happen. We're all familiar with the story that the Christopher Luxon government tells us, that we need to allow as many mega corporations to come in and extract as much as possible from our people and destroy our nature in hopes that we'll just get this growth that might one day, wait for it, trickle down. Even this week, national ministers in front of us in Select Committee were insistent in their insane ideology that apparently the only way that we can protect nature is first to allow it to be destroyed in order to apparently generate the profit that we then hopefully will see turned into restoring it. Meanwhile, the IRD is being resourced to chase down student loan holders and small businesses to the point of record liquidations, while this government shrugs its shoulders at the idea of applying already existing laws to require megatech companies sucking billions of dollars out of our country right now to pay their fair share of tax. New Zealanders aren't stupid. They are watching the cost of their groceries, power bills, and the cost of living go through the roof, while corporates rake in record profits, and the NBR rich list racks up $27 billion more just this past year, meaning that they now hold more wealth than the rest of the half of this country. This week in Parliament, I even got our National Party Minister of Finance to admit that extreme inequality is corrosive for our country, our economy, and our democracy. And the good news is, while this government seems to be scratching its head, the Greens have a plan to sort it out, to meet New Zealanders' basic needs and build the thriving economy that works for all of us. We will address inequality because right now, the wealthiest are paying just $9 in tax for every $100, while a teacher is paying $22. Not only is that fundamentally unfair, but it is robbing us all of the investment in the things that we as a country, as an economy, as people, and as communities need. That means implementing a super rich tax for net wealth above $10 million, excluding the family home, a capital acquisitions tax for net wealth above $1 million received, excluding the family farm and family home, and we will tackle corporate greed to level the playing field for our small and medium businesses by returning the corporate tax rate to pre-2008 levels to 33% for the 0.7% of biggest corporations and keeping it at 28% for everyone else. We will reverse Christopher Luxon's landlord tax cuts, and we will enforce a big tech tax on the multinational giants sucking billions in profits out of New Zealanders. We will implement a bank levy, like Australia has, on the big four Australian banks, and we will ensure fairer income tax settings so that 96% of New Zealanders keep more of what they earn, which also means a $10,000 tax-free threshold. But let's be clear, a tax cut doesn't actually mean anything, as people have experienced over the last 3 years, if we are not fixing the fundamental settings of our economy to ensure that it doesn't just get hoovered back out of people's pockets and higher prices for everything that they need to survive. That is why the critical part of this tax plan is unlocking the resources necessary to be able to invest in reducing the cost of everybody's basics, to set the conditions for all of us in this country to be able to thrive. New Zealanders feel how the rules are rigged when they work harder and longer, and even when they end up pocketing more money, they still can't get ahead. That big rip-off ends here. The Greens are proud to announce our first election policy to rebuild this incredible country for all of us. Happy to take your questions.
last election. What's the thinking around that? It's sort of watered down, I would say.
I'd say that this is common sense, practical, and immediately implementable. And look, let's just be straight up about the fact that we have heard loud and clear from people that they want clarity as to who this will apply to. So with that $10 million threshold, I think it's pretty clear.
So the last wealth tax wasn't easy to implement?
Well, what we know, based on the work that was undertaken by the former Labour government, which was published prior to, or rather after we announced our last election policy on the wealth tax, is that the IRD and Treasury have done a heck of a lot of work on that $10 million threshold and proposed it to Grant Robertson and David Parker, which you'll all hopefully be familiar with. So we know that this is able to be picked up off of the shelf right now. And yeah, look, we've also heard New Zealanders. We want clarity as to what that threshold looks like. So let's be loud and clear. This is a wealth tax that will only apply to the super rich in this country at that $10 million threshold, which will help us to unlock the resources necessary to invest in this country being a wonderful place for everybody to be able to not only survive, but to thrive, to contribute, and actually so that economic growth truly does lift all boats.
And how are you going to measure the net assets of the super rich? Will this be individual people, will it be families, will it be trusts?
Yeah, so a really important thing to understand about the super rich is that they know exactly how much they are worth because oftentimes they have all of those assets insured. So we would be applying it in the same way that we have looked at doing so in the past, and as obviously also the work has been done by both IRD and Treasury on that tax policy that was looking to be introduced by the former Labour-led government.
But the wealth is very hard to measure. Like even the rich list producers have trouble, and there's people that are left off that others know should be on there. So how do you propose to get through?
So, yeah, I mean, I think there's a few different things to unpack in this. One is that actually it is fundamentally important that the IRD, the Inland Revenue Department, has the ability to actually collect this data in the first place. Because what we know, and what David Parker, former Minister of Revenue, joked, is that the NBR rich list tended to have far greater detail and understanding of the wealth of the richest people in this country than even the IRD did. That's why the former government implemented the ability for the IRD to start measuring this stuff. And it's also why I think it's really important for New Zealanders to understand that one of the first things that the Christopher Luxon-led government did in its first month was move at pace to, before Christmas 2023, revoke the enabling legislation to allow the IRD to report on the unfairness of our tax system. That kind of tells us everything that we need to know. So the IRD absolutely does need to be empowered and resourced to do this. You'll see that reflected in our policy. In the past, under the former Labour-led government, when they were looking at potentially applying this wealth tax at the $10 million threshold, they estimated that the IRD would need about $3 million per year in order to be able to appropriately evaluate these things and apply the tax. We've resourced the IRD around $100 million in this proposal. So we think that is more than adequately accounted for.
Do you foresee implementation timeline delay? I mean, is this going to happen within 3 years?
We've shown that it is able to be picked off of the shelf, given that the work has already been done and our public sector is very familiar with it. And yes, we'd love to see it implemented. And this is kind of the point of democracy and the awesome thing about election campaigns. New Zealanders get to decide this. So that is why today we are so proud to be announcing this policy, because New Zealanders can see what it would look like to unlock the resources that allow everybody in this country to thrive and allow this beautiful, beautiful country and these beautiful, amazing, imaginative, creative New Zealanders to unlock their potential to contribute for all of us.
You just used that phrase, unlock the resources, for the second time. You said in the speech it's a critical part of the policy. What do you mean, unlock the resources?
Well, we know that right now, when wealth is sitting in asset portfolios, that it tends to be relatively passive, not circulating in our economy, not generating greater productivity, nor creating more jobs. So this is all about collectivising those resources so that we have democratic control over this thing called the economy, so that all of us are able to thrive. And obviously, you can see a hint there in the further policies that we will be putting out to lower the cost of living for all New Zealanders. Because,
do you have anything more specific to say?
Sorry?
You don't have anything more specific?
We've got more policies to come, Simon, which will be very exciting, but I think this is the other really important point, just not to labour it, but it's something that I've heard from many constituents in Auckland Central. People will remember the promises that this national-led government made when they were in opposition and throughout the campaign, where they said that they would put more money in people's back pockets and that would sort everything out. Well, they went ahead with those trickle-down tax cuts that we actually know the benefit largely accumulated towards the top end of town, but nonetheless, they did put more money in people's back pockets, and they cut the public services that all of us rely on in order to do it. That ended up in our basic cost of living going up, and actually this government displacing costs into other places, like road user charges, for example, increasing prescription fees. So that tax cut just ended up being swallowed back up out of people's pockets. So this is about not only rebalancing the tax system so that we start to tax wealth instead of placing the disproportionate burden on work, but also so that we unlock those resources to invest in our basic essential needs so that we lower all New Zealanders' cost of living and also improve our quality of life. That's the other really important point here. If we want to ask ourselves why hundreds of young New Zealanders are currently leaving the country every single day, not only is it that they don't see a sense of hope or the ability to plan for the future here, but they're also going for thriving arts and culture and a nightlife that is thriving and exciting. We can have that here at home.
So just coming back to this resourcing of IRD, are you confident that this will give you the visibility you need to, I guess, unpack people's complex financial situations, especially if their money and assets is spread across multiple entities?
Yes, we are, because this work has been undertaken in the past. And look, let's not pretend that change is not going to be challenging or difficult or come with its own fishhooks as we move to implement these kinds of things. But change being hard is not a reason that we shouldn't do it, especially as right now we are seeing the NBR Rich List in just a year add $27 billion to their wealth, unfathomable wealth that is just so impossible for the regular person to conceptualise. While 1 in 7 New Zealand children are living in poverty, and this government delivers its budget on a day that Community Housing Aotearoa tells us that we have record levels of homelessness in this country. Those are political choices, and the Greens are unapologetic about choosing regular, hard-working New Zealanders' ability to not only survive, but to thrive.
Are you worried about rich listers potentially taking their money offshore, and aside from the family home?
I mean, look, we hear threats of these kinds of things all the time. They're obviously overblown, and plenty of examples overseas where other jurisdictions have implemented wealth taxes. And what all of the evidence and experience shows us is that while those people make a heck of a lot of noise, those wealth taxes work, and they enable those countries to invest in their infrastructure and to have far more equitable economies than we have here right now.
A lot of the wealth taxes have been repealed, though, and that's for some of those kind of capital flight reasons. Even the advocates of wealth taxes see this as a danger if it's not designed properly. So how are you going to, or is that a concern? Are you going to design it in any particular way to prevent this?
So in the same way that IRD and Treasury in the past have baked in accounting for that very behavioural change, if we want to call it that, we have as well. If you look at the costings of our policies, you'll also note that our costings have been independently audited by Infometrics. So these things do stack up, not just on our own assessment, but also independently assessed. With regard to the fear-mongering that comes time and again as rich people and corporations promise that they will disappear if we dare to tax them fairly, I think this is actually a question for us as a country and a question for us as a democracy. Are we willing to be held hostage by incredibly wealthy people who are making bank screwing all of us over? Or are we willing to democratically decide the kind of country that we want to live in?
On the bank levy, are you worried about this being passed on to customers?
So this is where we would say that there's an incredible opportunity to bank local and to keep our money flowing in our own economy, which is kind of the major point that we're making here today, is that I hear loud and clear from New Zealanders across this country that they are fed up with our money going offshore and not circulating here to create jobs and to build local businesses. So the major bank levy, as we've just articulated in our speech, is something which is applied in Australia, so there's precedent over there, but also it wouldn't be applied to small players, the likes of Kiwibank.
What's the rationale around lowering the top income tax bracket to 160 from 180?
So this is just about balancing the tax brackets effectively. So we had to draw the line somewhere, and this is where we've decided to draw it. And we've heard loud and clear from New Zealanders, including, I can speak to my own electorate here in Auckland Central over just this past week, as I've had conversations with people who you guys probably have as well, who have said many, many times that they would be more than happy to pay a little bit more in tax if they knew that that was going to go into rebuilding our infrastructure. New Zealanders understand just how dilapidated our schools and our hospitals and our public service is at the moment. And this is really a question for us as New Zealanders. Do we want to invest in those things? Do we want to invest in ourselves? And do we want to carve a path to a brighter future? Or do we want to continue this death by 1,000 cuts trajectory?
In Britain, Reform is now consistently the most popular party in the opinion polls. Pauline Hanson in Australia, supposedly the most popular politician there, something to know about. Do you see that trend occurring in New Zealand? Do you expect it to occur? And I guess underneath that, the question is, who do you think your real opposition here is here? Is it national or is it someone affected?
So I think all across the world, over the last 40 years, centre-left parties have promised to do something about people's living standards, and they have ultimately refused to fix the economic settings which continue to produce that deep inequality, that suppress wages, that see all of our community's wealth being hoovered up. And what that has done is, to a certain extent rightfully, generated a heck of a lot of anger in many working class communities, which is now being captured and channeled in the wrong directions towards targeting certain minority groups by incredibly well-resourced and nefarious far-right political parties across the world. This is a coordinated effort. So our appeal, if we want our politics to not get that toxic, would be for all of us as New Zealanders to come back down to the basics. What are the things that all of us fundamentally can agree on, that we will fight for not only for ourselves and the people that we know and love, but even the people that we don't know, and dare I say it, the people that we don't like. This would look like the base of Maslow's hierarchy of needs: healthcare, housing, food, education, job opportunities. These are things that in 2026 all New Zealanders should be entitled to, and I think that's the pathway for our new solidarity to rebuild our country.
If Labour get the majority vote and they are in a position to negotiate, and you are at the negotiating table, what aspects of this will be your bottom lines? What will you be pushing for within this document?
We want to be really clear today that we are putting out a policy that will benefit the majority. 96% of people will pay the same or less income tax. 99.7% of the population will not pay the super rich tax. It is up to the people to decide what we can get across, and our message is clear. It is in your hands, the collective, to give us the mandate and the power to make sure that we can get a government, not just a new one, but one that actually corrects the distortion. I think people can see that when supermarkets and banks and power companies are making massive bucks, no one, no family or child should be living without home and kai. That is not right. People can see this. We can change this. It is simply political choice, and that is our message to the voters. We are talking to the people to ensure that we can get the support we need at the next election.
What happened this morning with the announcement? Why was this accidentally or on purpose put out early? You know, you're wanting people to vote for you, but then you put out something, you're not following your own rules. What are the public meant to draw from this?
Yeah, it was a human mistake. But look, it's an awesome policy, and we're actually pretty rapt that people are out there talking about it just, I don't know, a couple of hours earlier. We can see already that we're getting incredible feedback, actually. And yep, while it was human error, we're here to talk about it. The other political parties and oppositions are going to say what they would have said, whether we went earlier or later by a couple of hours. We're just stoked that it's out there and really excited because it's awesome. We love talking about it.
Show that you're ready to be in government.
It's just a human mistake. I think what it shows is that the Greens are the party ready to take on a system that has been rooted for decades, in fact, by successive governments, by successive policy decisions, that we actually have the power to change because there is enough in Aotearoa for everyone to live a good life.
Can't the wealthiest New Zealanders also just relocate to Australia and become Australian citizens, or spend a portion of the time overseas? Is that an easy option?
I mean, did we all catch the fact that our current Minister of Finance decided to embarrass all of us by going on Australian media and trying to pitch to the super rich that they should come here because we're a relative tax haven? Is that really the value proposition that we want to be offering to the world? Don't we instead want to bank on the fact that our children are able to thrive thrive regardless of whether they are born in what is currently a damp, cold, mouldy home or a mansion? Don't we want to be proud of our nature, of our rivers, of our forests, of our beaches? Those are the kinds of things that I think should be our selling point on the international stage. But unfortunately, this government seems intent on us getting engaged in this race to the bottom and selling off our country for parts as New Zealanders suffer. Frankly, that's not good enough.
But if the wealthy rearrange their living and their ownership arrangements so that they don't pay your taxes, then you won't have the money for them.
As I said to you earlier, we have modelled for behavioural change in the policies that we've put out, which obviously have been independently assessed. But I guess my point would also be to the super wealthy. Why do you guys want to live here? Surely you want to live here for sake of a decent quality of life, for sake of the beautiful nature that all New Zealanders care about, because of the fact that we offer every child in this country a fair go. If our only argument for keeping the super wealthy here is that we're going to continue cutting away at the public services, which in turn are seeing more New Zealanders sleeping rough on the streets and safety and security being undermined, I think we're on a pretty awful path.
Do you think that the super rich are a problem? Are they a problem in New Zealand? Is that...
This is not about calling anybody a problem. This is about saying that we have the resources necessary in this country to be able to ensure that everybody can thrive. We can have economic settings that actually see shared prosperity. I mean, let's just reflect on the fact that in the 1930s and 40s, when we built the country that we know today, which has been relatively shredded in the last 40 or so years as a result of this trickle-down, austerity, neoliberal approach, whatever you want to call it, in the 1930s and 40s, when we first created things that had no precedent, public healthcare, public housing, public education, and the welfare, now more aptly called the well-being state, we ended up with the greatest prosperity relatively that we had seen. And that has been undermined massively by political decisions that have been made in the last 40 years. We can make different decisions for the coming decades, especially with the challenges of climate change and AI very clearly in our sights.
Some of the super wealthy people who donate to the parties on the right have said things like, I do this because I'm really worried about the future of this country for my grandchildren. That's a quote from one of them. What do you think they're talking about there, given that Labour, as you said yourself, is not set to fundamentally change the economic settings? It doesn't want to. So what are they talking about those days?
I guess this really, at a fundamental level, comes back to whether we are willing to see our country not as 5 million random people all running around in competition with each other, fighting for survival, but the reality that we actually need each other if we are going to survive, which means that we see ourselves as a country of 5 million people who are capable of working together to build the society and the economy, the opportunities that all of us should have access to. So that's the proposition that we're putting on the table here.
Do you think they're worried about egalitarianism?
I think that if you read between the lines of the statement or the quote that you just read out to us, what you are hearing is a fixation on the success of the individual at the expense of society, at the expense of our country. And I think that that is a really unfortunate way to look at the world.
Do you think other political parties are being unrealistic by not proposing revenue measures in the sense that, like, I mean, even your potential coalition partners, Labour, aren't proposing many of them?
Look, we are the co-leaders of the Green Party. We are here putting a proposal before the voters, before the public, because we know the system cannot sustain the super rich holding all of the wealth and the power the way that it has over the past 4 decades or so. We know that we've got to reinvest back into the key services and resources that communities deserve: housing, health, education, water infrastructure, public transport. We are proposing something that we know people deserve because they can see the injustice. And it's up for other political parties to do what they will do. Our proposal, as we have been talking about this morning, is to be able to say, we can change this. It is within our grasps. It is up to you, the collective. You can actually have a better country for generations, not just for today, but for all of our mokopuna to come.
Probably take one more question if you guys have it. Simon?
I know this is an economic policy, but I'm just trying to remember if I've heard either of you today mention the words climate change.
I mean, we have spoken about nature. We've spoken about the degradation of, I guess, our biosphere related to nature. When it comes to tackling the massive issue of climate change, you will see that reflected in the coming policies that we have. But ultimately, this is about ensuring, as with all of our policies, that we lower New Zealanders' cost of living while also improving all of our quality of life, which allows us to tackle climate changing emissions, as we've outlined in the likes of Hiara Anamata, our green emissions reduction plan. We can lower emissions 6 times faster than the government's so-called plan, while also improving outcomes for New Zealanders across the board and rebuilding our infrastructure, lowering household bills through investment in things like renewable energy. But we'll have a lot more to say about that in the coming few weeks and months. Thank you guys all so much for your time.
Appreciate that.